Sport Fishing on the Fly is brought to you by Maui Jim Sunglasses. First Tellurium Corp., the future of mining. And Hardy Rods and Reels. Today on the bench I want to tie you up Don's Slim Jim Chironomid. Now there's a reason why I call it Slim Jim is because it is ultra thin. When you only use threads to tie the fly with, you can keep the flies very thin. So make sure you have these materials ready before you tie the fly. For the hook, we'll use a size 16 2x long curved. We'll use some 8/0 blue dun for the thread. We'll use a white paint marker for the gills, a 3/32 inch matte black bead for the bead, some 8/0 blue dun thread for the body, some 6/0 black thread for the rib, and some 8/0 copper thread for the thorax. So to start the fly off, I put the bead on the hook with the small diameter of the bead towards the eyelet. Because we're not tying gills on, we'll use the special pen to put a white dot on that or after. So right now I'm just going to start with my blue dun thread, one of my favorite colors for bodies, for chironomids. Once we have that on there, I'm going to take some black thread and I'm just going to wrap over the black thread. And just wrap down with your black thread, holding your black thread, and wrap over. Now you want to keep this body very thin. It's called Slim Jim for a reason. You keep it very thin. It's just essentially one wrap all the way down. So we get right to there, right to the bottom of the hook. Get rid of this excess. Then what I'm going to do is just keep my black thread off to the back for now, because that'll be the rib later. I'm just going to take a few wraps on the way up. And again, really, really light. If you want to thin out your thread, just give it some twists. And just keep wrapping your thread back up. I'm only going to put 2 layers. That's it. 2 layers of thread on this. Keep it real small, real thin. So there it is. Real thin body. We have the thread at the top now. Now we're going to take our black thread and we're going to make ribs on the fly. So just slowly progressing. I like to do about, again, 6 or 7. And you see how thin this is going to be. It's just a very, very thin fly, and it's just killer when they're keyed on those thin chironomids. There's 4, 5, 6, and probably just 1 to finish off near the head. Then take a wrap over your thread a couple of times, and cut off your black thread. So the body's tied in. That's all it is to the body. Very simple. Now what we're going to do is just whip finish the blue dun thread. Get rid of that. Again, very simple. And then I'm taking some copper. Now this copper thread I really like too, with this real thin pattern. A lot of times I'll use rust, but I found this copper really sets it off. It's really quite nice. So make sure you get as fine as you can, as close as you can to that thread. You'll get a little bit that wicks over. It's all right. Just form a nice thorax on the fly and just taper up to the bead. Just like that. For a few turns. Now we've got a very thin body, a small taper to the bead, and now we're just going to whip finish off 3 or 4 turns right there with that, the real copper color. Cut it thin. Now we've got just a little bit left of that thread. Just get a little flame, and that wicks it off and burns it off. Keeps that fly super thin, which is really nice. Now what we're going to do is, before we finish off, we got this white paint marker. Shake it up, and instead of putting gills on it, I'm just going to take a dab right at the top of right at the head. You can see, I don't know if I can turn the hook with that focus, but I'll get a shot of it after. Just puts a nice little white dot right at the top of that bead. And that will just look like gills. It just really keeps the fly thin. compact, easy to tie. It's just a great way to tie thin chironomids. Now to finish up, I'll just take a little bit of my Loctite. I love Loctite. It's probably the best stuff you can use for nice thin-bodied flies. And then we protect the whole thing. And I even like to go over that the paint side too, right? You don't want to use too much of this stuff, but just keep it nice and thin. Coat that whole body and cover that little bit of paint too, because that dries up pretty quick. And that will protect your fly. So there it is, Don's Slim Jim Chironomid. You know, blue dun is one of my favorite body colors, and the thinness of the fly is so critical, especially when you're fishing trophy lakes or very clear lakes. Those fish can be very finicky, so you got to make sure you have some of these in your fly box.